Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are looking at, yes, the life of Daniel recently, but the passage about the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I think is just so good that we can't pass it up. Even though Daniel doesn't really play that big of a part in this section, I think it's incredibly important to look at it, see what we can learn from it as well. So we are going to look at that today, and then Tuesday, next Tuesday, we are going to look at it. So we're going to split it up into a couple parts. This first part here, we're going to look at verses 8 through 18 of Daniel chapter 3. And then next Tuesday we're going to finish it up looking at verses 19 through 30, or the end of the chapter. But the first part is really about not bending the knee to King Nebuchadnezzar, and in our case, not bending the knee to things that are not God, not bending the knee to idols in our life, even if they aren't an actual image. And then the second part, which we'll look at next Tuesday, is about being in the midst of the flames and what that is. But I won't spoil it here. So, but let's dive into the passage of the fiery furnace. So, in verses 1 through 8, in verses 1 through 7, sorry, you basically have Nebuchadnezzar literally taking the dream that Daniel just told him, just reiterated to him, and gave him the interpretation where Babylon is the head of the image in pure gold. And he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to take this literally. I'm going to build this statue. Like, he takes it absolutely literally, and he builds it from head to toe, even though Babylon is just the head of that image in that dream. Now he decides, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna build the whole entire thing, and this thing was massive. So basically, this thing is 60 cubits. A cubit is about a foot and a half. So 60 of that. That's pretty huge. So you have basically, well, I'm trying to think what this would be. So you would have 60 feet plus another 30, I guess. So it would be 9 stories tall, and its breadth would be 6 cubits. So that's about 9 feet, 9 feet in breadth. So this thing is massive, massive, and he sets it up in Babylon. But then he gives his basically everybody a rule, and we're given that rule in verses 4 and 6. So let's look at that in Daniel chapter 3. And the herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, verse 7, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So, you have just this massive, massive statue. And it is, again, 90 feet in height, 9 feet in breadth. It's just absolutely massive. And whenever music starts playing, you are supposed to bow down to it. You are supposed to kneel before it. And obviously, it's not about the image, it's about the person that's behind the image. Most likely, when it's talking about King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, it's most likely a golden image that is close to the appearance of the king himself. It's not just like he built a golden image of his dog or of his cat or his favorite animal or whatever. It's most likely after himself. And so this is all about worship of the self, and King Nebuchadnezzar seeing himself as more than human, and that is where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take a little bit of an issue with this. So let's look at the main part, which is verses 8 through 18. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So it's interesting here, a couple of things. One, why is Daniel not mentioned here? Most likely it's because the province of Babylon that is being talked about here, which we see at the end of verse 2, he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Most likely this area is not where Daniel is working. He is often working in the king's court, so most likely he's either indoors a lot or he's just in a different place and is not near the statue, and so doesn't one, hear the music or see the statue, and that's probably why we don't see him mentioned here. Unlike Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which we can assume are working outside a lot more, or they are working in the specific area where the field of Dura is. That's my guess why we see that. The second thing, and I know I've harped on this a little bit already, but again, the idea of keeping the Hebrew names or here, the idea of keeping the Hebrew names, we do see a lot, but here it changes. Here it changes to the Babylonian names. I think the idea is that you are trying to get them to basically you are trying to get them to what's the right word, not force them, but in a way, yes, and force them to be Babylonians, to leave behind their old life where they were taken from as captives, and now they are supposed to be strictly Babylonians. And so far, we've seen the author of Daniel, most likely Daniel, but we've seen the author of Daniel shy away from giving those names. Well, here he doesn't. He does give the Babylonian names. And I think the point, though, is that even though they were thought to be Babylonian with their work and even their name, they still did not bend the knee to what Nebuchadnezzar wanted. And so I think that's why we see the difference, why their Babylonian names are given here and not beforehand. So I think that's why we see that difference here. But yeah, they do not bow down, and it's kind of obvious what is brought up at the end of verse 12. They don't serve the Babylonian gods, but more they do not worship the golden image. And from this time, obviously Nebuchadnezzar knows that Daniel and these three men don't worship the Babylonian gods, and he had no problem with it. But here he becomes furious, as we see in verse 13 in a second, because I believe of the not worshiping the golden image or not bending the knee to the self of Nebuchadnezzar. So, verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you don't worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? So, Nebuchadnezzar gives them the ultimatum. You have one last chance to bend the knee, not just to this image, but to myself as your authority. And it's interesting here, this question at the end, because it seems very straightforward, not with a lot of malicious intent until the last phrase. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Obviously, the casting into burning fiery furnace is very malicious, but I think that phrase there, calling into question the God that just revealed himself to you through the dream and the interpretation of the dream that you just had through the ministry of Daniel. And he knows that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are connected to Daniel and his God. And yet he says, who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? It's the same God that just interpreted the dream for you. So it is, I think that is the thing that makes me go, what is Nebuchadnezzar thinking? But when you and I get so caught up in the self and so caught up in the things that we want and we desire, we are blind to things that we know deep down within ourselves that are to be true. We blind ourselves to that because we are so focused on what we want. And so I think that's what is happening to Nebuchadnezzar here. Well, obviously, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not following that route and are not falling into that trap. Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So basically, they said, look, we know what is true. We know that our Lord is the only God. And so, therefore, our mind is already set. That phrase, we have no need to answer you in this matter, it's because they are so certain about what God has called them to do, and that He will also see them through whatever it might be. First, he will deliver them out of the fiery furnace, which, spoiler alert, is what happens. Or, the other hand, they will stand firm in their convictions, in their belief, and in their faith, even if it leads to their death. So, that is the setup for the great passage of the fiery furnace. And it really does have to do with not bending the knee and not surrendering to idols within your life and keeping God at the center of your heart, your desires, and your will. And all of that then leads into the rest of the passage of the fiery furnace, which we will look at next Tuesday. But I thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today as we dove into Daniel chapter 3 with the Brahmin word. I will see you next Tuesday as we wrap up the fiery furnace. See you then.